very good evening, fellow viewers. Welcome once again to another edition of Wacana English Edition, brought to you down here by Sinar Daily. My name is Meor Addelan, and it is a pleasure to be with all of you once again. Our monthly edition over here, where we dissect into whatever that is happening, whatever that is trending, and whatever that is worth to talk about that is happening here in Malaysia in English edition for our international viewers as well as for the English-speaking viewers as well. So we have a very, very, very interesting topic that we have brought to you guys for today specifically. I just want to talk about abbreviations a bit, because who doesn't love abbreviations? You got ABS, you got BSB, you got ASP, so on and so forth. And another abbreviation that has been going around lately within our nation is 3R. No, I'm not talking about reduce, reuse, and recycle. No, that's another bit of the 3R. And no, I'm not talking about that show during your younger times where you watch on the TV. There's this show called 3R. We're not talking about that, but we're talking about race. We're talking about religion, and we're talking about royalty. It has been the headline recently, this particular 3R, because, well, the state elections is coming up. If you guys have been living under the rock, unfortunately, a lot of things are going to be happening within these next few weeks. Specifically, tomorrow is actually the nomination day for the state election 2023, which consists of 6 states, which are Kelantan, Kedah, Selangor, Terengganu, Penang, and Negeri Sembilan. Another important date as well, August the 8th, is where the early voting will be commencing. And also the polling day itself will be happening on the 12th of August. We won't be touching much about politics today, even though we are, because it is somewhat likely when you discuss about 3R, you kind of like have to bring in the politics side of it, because that's where apparently this statement or this phrase has been made famous of within these past few weeks. And to dive in, to digest and to dissect, as mentioned, this very, very interesting topic about finding middle ground for 3R conversations, we have a very young panel together with me. I feel so old with them, but nevertheless, they are very experienced. They are very knowledgeable with this. Let me introduce to all of you guys. To my furthest left, we have Arina Najwa Ahmad Said, the Bauer Group Asia Director. Arina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and in the middle, we have the gentleman in that fancy batik of his, Amir Farid Rahim, the KRA Group Political Risk Consultant. Amir, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
All right, and also to the gentleman to my left, we have Nathaniel Tan, or famously known as Nate, actually the coordinator for Project Bangsa Malaysia. Nate, Nat, thank you so much for being with us.
Delighted to be here, thank you.
All right, let's dive in, because again, as mentioned, 3R, it is a very sensitive topic to discuss when it comes to race, religion, and royalty, especially the fact that we are chasing that 12th of August date where the state elections are going to be held. But before we even go through that, we do want to highlight to our fellow viewers of what has happened quite recently, just to give you guys a bit of a statement of what has happened, that the caretaker Kedah Menteri Besar Datuk Seri Sanusi was actually arrested under the Sedition Act at 3 a.m., that's 3 in the morning, and was later charged in court that morning itself. And the authorities has said that he was not responding to calls, thus why the arrest actually took place. Now, who would like to kick things off? What is your opinion on this matter? I think Nat has some kind of a burning comment about this one, talking to us prior to this. Nat, what do you think about all of this? What's your opinion?
Definitely not burning, boss, but... So, I mean, let me start things off by saying, I think Sanusi is a pretty guy who says a lot of hateful things, very racist things, very divisive things.
Okay.
I'm definitely not a fan, right?
All right.
But the old Voltaire saying, right? I disagree with what you say, but I'll defend your right to say it. I don't think of this case just in terms of like how it applies as regarding Sanusi, but how anyone who's making comments about race, religion, royalty, right? I mean, I really don't think that this kind of heavy-handed treatment is really the way to go. Is it really necessary? Do you really need to arrest them? I mean, if someone's not answering your calls at 2 a.m., 2:30, I don't think that's a reason to arrest. I mean, it's sleeping time, right? So I think, and it's very perplexing,
right.
in the context of like in the state elections that are coming up. People, I think Malaysian voters like to stand up for the underdog.
All right.
In no world is Sanusi anywhere close to Anwar Ibrahim, right?
All right.
But at the same time, we remember what happened in '99 when you clamped down on Anwar that hard, the black eye and all that oppression.
Yeah.
How did the voters respond, especially the Malay voters, right? In
Yeah.
the 1999 elections, right?
Correct.
It's a severe backlash. So I mean, watching this happen just before the state elections, you almost think, is this sabotage? I mean, why
Yeah.
else would you do something so likely to end in backlash?
Yeah, it is. It seems a bit overboard when you think about it. As what Nat has actually mentioned. I mean, like, going to a person's house, a person of interest. At that particular moment in time, because he wasn't convicted as of yet, but he was actually brought in at 3 o'clock in the morning. Again, I mean, like, majority of us, unless you were as a bouncer at the club, maybe like you'll be asleep at that time, and let alone a politician, a Menteri Besar, who is taking care of his state. I mean, your thoughts?
Thank you. I agree with what Nat has said. There's a perception of heavy-handedness in the whole issue surrounding Sanusi's 3 a.m. arrest. Of course, again, politicians, this is a very heated political cycle. Sanusi has said a lot of things that he should not probably have said. But having said that, it is the way the whole thing was handled that I think has led to severe criticism from the public. So I think in this case, we need to make sure that there's due process. Due process is followed, and there's no double standard in investigations. You don't speed up investigations for certain people and do not investigate others. If you're investigating everyone, investigate everyone. Take the time needed to investigate. So due process in terms of the investigation, and then court procedures. Let it happen within due process. But at the same time, politicians need to be more responsible. They know that, of course, you may be representing a race-based party or religious-based party, but we are talking about when you're talking about Malaysia politics, the social fabric, the DNA is very multiracial. So politicians need to be more responsible in what they say. So probably when we talk about 3R, race, religion, and royalty, I think politicians, when they are in public spaces, they should practice another 3R, which I think is being respectful, being responsible, and probably to win votes, you have to be relatable. So that's a different tip altogether. But yeah, when you want to talk about 3R, race, religion, and royalty, follow that other set of 3R. That would, I think, that's how I want to start this conversation this evening. Respectful, responsible, and relatable.
Relatable. Okay. By the end of the show, I can guarantee all of you viewers at home or wherever it is that you are, we're going to have variations of this 3R as long as it makes the best sense out there to the rakyat. At least coming to you, our third panel, Arina, again, because the fact that the Kedah MB was actually, was arrested under the Sedition Act, others, there's even an ideology or statements out there. People are actually saying that it's an irony since one half of the current administration, this being Pakatan Harapan itself and the Prime Minister, has voiced out against the rule of Sedition Act. Now, what happened to the whole concept of reformasi here? Isn't it what it was campaigned before, the freedom of speech, wanting to say what you think without having being caught into all of this red tapes and whatnot? What do you think?
I think firstly we need to acknowledge that currently that administration is now the government. And given the fact that the Selangor Royal Office was the one that issued the statement saying that Sanusi was offensive, and that led to the investigation and that led to the arrest, I think the Prime Minister and the coalition are put in a difficult position on how to respond to it, while also managing that relationship with the monarchy. So I think they have to kind of change their strategy and not behave too opposition-like and respond via social media or through a statement. However, following that, if we if people were following Azalina and in cabinet, they brought it up.
Yeah.
It was brought up and it was discussed, and there was a sort of consensus or an agreement that there needs to be some change. However, possibly narrowed down a little bit more to focus on one R, and maybe for the other two R's, which is race and religion, to make it a bit more specific in terms of what those offences are.
Yeah.
So I would say that they acknowledged it the best that they could given the position that they are in, because they are in the current administration now.
Yeah.
However, going back to the point of reformasi, I wouldn't say it's as rara as it was before out in the streets. Like I said, it goes back to their current position. They did what they could, given that they're now in power. Yeah.
But Nat, coming back to this, because again, this is the oldest trick in the book, if you want to look at it, because like regardless whether you're the governing administration, whether you're the opposition or not, it is the oldest trick in the book where anybody would actually use political wise as a as a style, or should I say as a tradition, to just knock a peg or two down in regards of their opposition. It's nothing new, isn't it?
Yeah, I've actually thought about this a lot. This is something I really is minor little obsession of mine. I think in my writings I've described it a little bit as the when you change government, the actors swap roles, but the script remains the same.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly, right? And
Right.
it's very perplexing at first, right? But but the more I've looked at it, or the kind of things I've been exposed to, I realized that a lot of it is a certain, you could say, it's past dependency. Like I said, it's the way things have always been done.
Sure.
The way the government always does things, right? There's politicians and then there's the government, right?
Sure.
So and you notice that when politicians become the government, it's like a huge center of gravity. It's like a little black hole onto itself, right? And once you enter into that orbit, you just follow that orbit.
Yep.
You come in, a lot of people come in with ideas, I want to do things differently,
Yeah.
do things differently. Some don't even come in with that. Some just, dibawa arus, right? You're
Alright.
just carried by the currents, right? And it's a little bit sad. It makes me worry a little bit. And this is an example. You would think that all these people who have been on the wrong end of the Sedition Act so many times, right? Back in those days, we are all, people like me in opposition during BN days, right? Every time an arrest like this would happen, we would say, the government only arrests you when they don't have an intelligent reply to what you have to say. And the Sedition Act is particularly, very vaguely worded. A lot of things that I've written, I've tweeted, can be considered seditious if you
Okay.
you
Admitting it on camera right now, live, yes, okay.
No, depending on how you interpret it, it's too broad. That's always been the problem with the Sedition Act. So, I don't think it bodes well. There are other acts in the penal code, other provisions that allow you to really, if people are inciting violence and things like that, right? So I think it's troubling.
Yeah. We'll definitely dive into that a bit more, not the astrology bit, but of course, the topic at hand, what we're talking about today, about the 3 R's, race, religion, as well as royalty. I do want to come back to you, Ariza, the fact that you've actually mentioned in the cabinet, it was actually discussed by the Law Minister, Datuk Seri Azalina Othman, has actually said that the cabinet has agreed that changes should be made to limit the Sedition Act 1948's use to only matters involving royalty. Now, where is this coming from? Is it something that is just being plucked out of the air, and does it benefit the rakyat at the end of the day? Because again, all these laws, all these acts are for the rakyat and how we are to live our lives. What do you think?
I think going back to what Nat said earlier, in terms of once you're in government, then you realize your priorities change. So I think this is kind of the first step to a progressive move to have better conversations around the Sedition Act. I think conversations around challenging the royalty may have been difficult. To completely say that, yes, it's free for all, let's copy what Thailand is doing right now and just let the people attack the royalty. I think they're not that ready yet for that kind of scenario. So I think hence race and religion could be something, probably a compromise or a middle ground to go and say that, look, this is where we can have a lot more conversations on, especially because there are a lot of existing standards internationally, right?
Yeah.
So you have hate speeches globally, laws, anti-discrimination laws, and especially these are the things that you can benchmark against. So royalty is very case-by-case basis.
Sure.
So I feel this is, granted, it would have been great to have a more comprehensive or holistic view on the Sedition Act, for all the three R's.
Yeah.
But this is definitely a progressive move forward.
Yeah.
If I may jump in just a little
Please,
bit,
please.
First of all, Arcelina is a pretty dynamic, interesting leader to watch. She's got a great staff and everything. And this race, religion, royalty, we say 3R, right? But I tend to think of it a little bit more as 2 plus 1R.
Okay.
I think race and religion are similar. It's like the 2 oranges and 1 apple kind of thing.
Okay.
Right? Race and religion talk a lot about, have a lot to do with identity, and it plays more in day-to-day life. Whereas royalty is kind of a different fish because it's not so much in the daily fabric of your lives, if you're normal, rakyat and things like that. So and it's just something that I think is useful to keep in mind.
Yeah, and what you have said just now, Nat, I do want to go back to you, Ame, is that, because again, nowadays especially, within not just Malaysians but all around the world, people would have social medias where they would express their opinions very seamlessly because everything is at the end of your fingertips. And the thing is, your speech, any kind of speech up there, is actually can be very subjective. Not everything is all in black and white because what you read doesn't really mean of what you're expressing. It has no intonations to it. It has no feelings toward it because if you read a sentence, it's just gonna be that. And even if you mean it as a joke, sometimes people don't get it as a joke. So my question is that the issues of freedom of speech is being questioned over here, and how can we ensure that it is not being abused and exploited if the new amendments should take place, as what we have just discussed? I mean,
Yes, adding on to what our two speakers have said also, when we look at the Sedition Act, you also have to look at this amendment to the Sedition Act in 2015, that has made it tighter under former Prime Minister Najib Razak, who actually promised to repeal the act in 2011 or 2012, if I remember correctly, but then went on to make it even harsher. So there's to add to the social media elements, I remember at that time in 2015. So therefore, the 1948 Act is already a draconian act that was in place before pre-independence, to counter insurgencies, but it's been updated in 2015, very recent, to accommodate for the changing landscape of social media. So apart from, that's the legal solution, going for the law. We have to have stronger act and all that, a newer act, but it must be supported by a more conducive policy ecosystem, a combination of education to make sure that the general public, first, it's very difficult to have education and engagement because the Seditious Act is quite broad and very flexible in whoever who uses it. So there needs to be, first, on the Act, I think there needs to be safeguards to this Act. That's one part. And two is educating and engaging the wider public to understand not just the Act, but to understand that we live in a multiracial society, and therefore there are certain ways that we should conduct ourselves in discussion with regards to race, religion, royalty, or other sensitive topic, and without losing the intellectual kind of like robustness and honesty in the discussion.
Wow.
So it's very difficult, but it's multi-layered, and you need to look at the root cause of it and start from schools, for example. Start with your community, start with your family.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely have to start somewhere. It is getting heated over here. It is definitely getting discussed over here on this particular topic, the topic about 3R. Next, we're going to be asking about why the need to talk about 3R, but we're going to take a short break first. Do not go anywhere. Please stay within our orbit, and we'll be back with you guys in a minute here on Wacana English Edition. Stay with us.
Perikatan Nasional seems to be a better party, a cleaner party. Even we have prepared ourselves to be ready to continue the struggle of UMNO. So we like to invite UMNO's members who are not happy with their situation, the leadership situation. Please, you can migrate to PN at any time.
For next gen, basically our vision is for families to come here and they create happy memories together as well as one. Because it's a whole family theme park, one thing. And also, this is one of the largest indoor theme park. It's about 43,000 square feet.
Wow, that's big.
Thank you so much for staying on still with us here on Wacana English Edition, talking about find a middle ground for 3R conversations together with our, as mentioned, young and vibrant and knowledgeable panelists we have over here. We have Nat, we have Amir together with Arina as well. Yep, we spoke about space, we spoke about fruits, we spoke about fish, but now we want to talk about more about 3R, race, religion, and royalty. Nat, as what you mentioned earlier, it shouldn't be 3R, it should be 2+1. But regardless of that, why do we need to talk about it? Why do we need to know more about this?
Thanks, boss. So the trend nowadays, right? You always hear from the government, don't you dare touch on 3R, or we'll come after you. Police police car going to be outside your door, that kind of thing. Again, I'll leave aside royalty for the time being. I talk mainly about race and religion.
This is the first two R's.
There is a sense in Malaysia these are things are taboo, right? You don't bring this up in polite society or talk about it at the at dinner parties. It's just a no, right? But you think about it, right? The analogy I like to use, right, is this: we've done fruits, space. Now we go to family, lah. Okay. Let's say family, father, mother. Let's say kids are maybe Rachel and Joseph, right? The kids, okay? So, let's say, Rachel feels all this while, daddy always prefers Joseph, right? Because he's a boy, and everything is always goes to him. And maybe Joseph feels like, oh, mama always likes Rachel, all the attention, all the love, all the money always goes to her, right? And there's this real resentment among the children, right? It's a problem, it's causing strife, it's coming out in different ways, right? And what's the solution? Never talk about it. Don't ever mention this. Don't ever bring it up. How do you think that family is going to end up? It's
a lot of repressed feelings.
Exactly. It's a lifetime of therapy, right? That's Malaysia for the last 60 years. Don't talk about it, right? And then what's worse is that, daddy will go to Joseph or Rachel and say, I think, mama prefers, and you hasut one another, right? Pit one against the other. This is what's been happening. And is the solution really don't talk about it? No, I think that the solution is about how we talk about it. And how we've talked about it for the last 60 years is, that one got everything, we getting nothing. And the other person is saying, Rachel is saying, that one getting everything, I getting nothing. Joseph is saying, that one getting everything, I getting nothing. Both can't be true, right? Doesn't make any sense at all. It's not logic. It makes no sense. But if we keep shouting like that, shouting past one another, you'll never have any real meaningful conversation. Instead, why don't we try respectful, responsible, relatable, right? Real person-to-person feelings. If you've ever been through couples therapy and things like that, right? They tell you to use I statements. I feel this, when you do this, it makes me feel like that. This kind of, they've done it, Ideas in Malaysia and a couple of different organizations, that different kind of conversations. Where you set the context a little bit differently, you use slightly different words, you really meluahkan perasaan, talk about your feelings, right? How you really feel. I think I think we need to talk about race and religion, but we need to try and do it in a way that's a bit more constructive.
Sure, all right.
No, I would like to butt into what, to add on to what Nat said. No, I totally agree. And if political parties find it the ones that is pushing this is obviously the politicians and the political parties with their stands, right? Which is not wrong, because as long as it is not illegal to have a party based on one's race and one's religion, it is a democracy and they're allowed, then they can speak and whatever that they think represent their vote base. But often the time I find that the issue becomes too political and the political parties themselves can't find a middle ground in talking about this thing, we need to empower an honest, again, an independent, fed civil society. Civil society needs to be the arbiter when it comes to the discussion on race and religion, because you can't give it to the political parties because they will want to maximize political mileage.
Correct.
So this is, I think, and they're fanning the fire to galvanize support. It's totally understandable. Whether or not we accept it, that's up to the voters and how they vote, right? So therefore, in order to have an honest discussion, they need to empower civil society, and civil society must be politically independent. They cannot be affiliated and then you wear the civil society mask and talk about it. We need to have a mature, honest conversation, like what Nat said just now. Analogy about, I love Nat's analogy, and I'm thinking about Rachel. And,
so Arina, coming to you, I mean, like, you've been to couples counselling? No, I don't know, because again, it's being talked about here. But again,
maybe should I? I need to think about it now. Yeah.
But when you talk about this 3R or 2+1, as what Nat has famously tagged over here, funny enough, as also what Ami has actually mentioned as well, this thing only came about because of the fact that we're having a state election soon. I mean, it's almost drawn into that conversation where we didn't have this issue at all previously, but now the fact that, we're going to be, going to the ballots and somebody needs to be the MP and whatnot, hence why this thing is now being blown up and being talked more, or should I say not talked more, because of the restrictions and whatnot. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit when we kind of can already predict these kind of scenarios closer to big events like elections. So then that begs the question of who created this muscle, right? That created this muscle that it becomes okay for people to use these as tactics closer to elections. And I think if we go back in history, people vote who they want to vote, right? So, I mean, you have, as long as it's allowed to have race-based political parties, and if that's what people care about, then they will continue to vote race-based political parties or religion-based political parties. And the reason why politicians use that against them is because we don't have these nuanced conversations. And sometimes it's a vicious cycle. You don't want them to have nuanced conversations or honest conversations, because then you can leverage on this and use it to gain political mileage. So this is where the challenge is, because I think now we've used it so much and it becomes so ingrained in us, and it's become a muscle that we don't know how to have these conversations anymore, and we don't want to have these conversations anymore, and it becomes reductive. So I think it's really important in this sense, because Malaysia 50, 20 years ago is very different from a Malaysia now. People are a lot more interracial. We have a lot more interracial couples. How people perceive themselves and their race and their religion is completely different as well. So now what we're actually having an issue with is, how do we define ourselves now? How am I a modern Malay? As a modern Malay, what do I believe in now? As a modern Muslim, what do I believe in now? And if we don't challenge that and force the politicians to talk about these things, they will continue.
To define our identity politics should be in Malaysia.
Correct. And because it's not wrong, like you said, to define yourself based, if I'm a Malay, I'm a Malay, I'm a Muslim, if I'm Chinese, whatever, right? But it's then what comes after that. Does it stop there? No, of course not. So I think that's where, we need to have, it's still important to have these conversations.
If I may a little bit, I think Arina is alluding to this kind of chicken and egg kind of thing, right? And I talked about path dependency. So I've said this so many times it gets boring, but when Malaysia was born, right, we had, Malay party, Chinese party, Indian party, right? And if you're a Malay party, right, if it's right there in your name, or Chinese party, whatever, it's Chinese Association, Indian Congress, right? It's right there in your name, and you start to, everything becomes racial in your mind. We'd say, don't politicize race and religion. I like to say that in Malaysia, we have racialized politics, not politicized race, right? So, it shapes your thinking in that way, and you become too used to it. It's a muscle that you don't know how to do otherwise, right? And as you know, Amir talked about civil society, right? And I think Arina and I both did a little bit of work with Tan Sri Nazir Razak, and Dr. Husam as well from Sinar, right? And they both recognize this idea of like the need to take things offline. because you know that the political process has just gotten way too toxic and wrapped up in itself, right? So maybe one of the only solutions is to have a conversation that's separate from that space. Somewhere where you can really dive into this kind of nation building things. So it's like some of the work that this Project Bangsa Malaysia does with ABIM on one side, with Dong Chong, with Chinese Assembly Hall, with the East Malaysian organizations, right? That's trying to build what we want the future of Malaysia to look like.
But taking what Nat has mentioned, I mean, it's easier said than done, though, because again, we've been living in this society, in this kind of thinking, as mentioned before, a Malay party for the Malays, a Chinese party for the Chinese, Indian for the Indians. This has been integrated within ourselves since our forefathers before, back in the 40s, 50s and whatnot. And it is hard for the younger generation, the one that matters right now, to actually move forward and making it conducive, let alone a rewarding time. As we are right now, I mean.
Well, that is true because, the young ones absorb things very more easily than others, and their opinions are shaped from what the experiences of their parents. But now with social media, they're learning all different things from all around the world. So if you talk to an 8-year-old now, they're very knowledgeable about what's happening in the US, what's happening around the world, and they are seeing kinds of anti-hate. They understand anti-hate crime, for example, and they can tell parents, "Oh, you shouldn't be saying things like that." My nephews do that all the time to our adults and in our families. So over time, things will change. But this is again an intergenerational responsibility. So if we this goes back to education, right? And social engagement in having this very difficult conversations which we need to have, but have it honestly, transparently, and accountable as possible. And every generation has a role to play here, so that we do not have a generation that grows up in hostility, like a fear, atmosphere of fear, ecosystem of hatred. We need to put a break on this, a stop to this if at all possible. But then again, as we said, identity politics is always, it's the easiest way out for those who don't want to talk about difficult issues. There are other things, if political parties can focus on economic policies that cut across races, for instance. If they refocus, rechannel their full energy to talking about the policies and not easily reach out to race and religion card, then we would probably have a more easier time in managing these difficult conversations. So again, I know I've talked a lot about politicians and political parties because at the end of the day, it's their responsibility. Am I putting the blame on them for fanning it? Not them alone, but there are others with vested interests who may be trying to incite this. So we have to go back again to leadership. Leaders of political parties must try their very best to discipline the parties and refocus on things that matter most. Because even if you look at polls, we've conducted our own research into issues that matter in elections, right? Race and religion do matter, but it's always third, fourth issue. Economic issues and related economic issues, such as it depends on that particular cycle. Is it more employment opportunities? Is it low wage? Like currently, there's a lot of talk about low wage because of inflation problems. 5 years ago, housing was a big issue. So these will always come up in the top three, whereas race and religion is 4 and 5. But why do we see in political cycles race and religion issue in Ceramah circuit and all that becomes a top priority?
Exactly. Speaking about economy, again, that's what we Malaysians want. We want a better economy for the rakyat, for ourselves, to make sure that we are staying relevant and able to actually put food on the table at the end of the day, because that's what every Malaysian wants. Touching about education as well and economy, Ariza, a lot of issues are also intertwined with all of this hype about 3R. You talk about race and you talk about the economic state, you know, the rich Chinese or the poor Malays and whatnot, or even like education as well. There have been a lot of issues that has been raised, but how are we to approach this matter for us to be totally unbiased, or at least cater to every single aspect there is? Because like it or not, we are still there. As mentioned, we can't run away from that. How do we approach this?
It's definitely very complex, and
I can hear the sigh in the
no, because it's an age-old issue, right?
Yeah.
At least for Malaysia, because number one, we have to acknowledge politics and business, or government and business, are intertwined. So because of that, we have to acknowledge that sometimes the government's agendas, when it comes to race and religion, also sometimes seep in through into policies and into businesses, right? So if you're looking at government-linked companies or government or state-owned companies, issues like ASB, for example, that's clearly also very racially linked, but also tied into economy. So then I think what needs to happen here is, number one, acknowledgement and clarity in terms of what are actually our objectives. If we do acknowledge that there are certain communities in Malaysia that are being prejudiced against continuously because of their race or because of their religion, there needs to be acknowledged. Hence, what's the other criteria? Those who have benefited from it, who are from that race, like say the rich Malays, what then do we do with that? So do you then afford or get these incentives because you're a Malay, or because you have been prejudiced, right? And because of that historical background that you have. So I think there needs to be a very clear objective. And third, it's what's the check and balance? Because especially when you're talking about affirmative action, right? I mean, I'm just talking about it because it is very much intertwined in terms of policies. Typically, even in other countries like in the US or South Africa, who also have affirmative action policies, typically the ones that benefit the most are the ones from the middle income group, because they have accessibility. They are aware of these incentives in comparison to those of the B40 group. So I think it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all, but there needs to be clarity in objective to resolve this. Second is, what are the checks and balances that we can kind of input so that we can mitigate people abusing that system or abusing some of these incentives and economic policies. Because, of course, we have a needs-based approach. That's poverty eradication. That can be cut across all. But then when it comes to very tenuous issues where you see people systematically being, removed from the economic system based on race, gender, religion, what have you, then that's where the conversation of race needs to be honest, like what we talked about earlier, and a lot more nuanced. Yeah.
Sure. Wow. We are definitely diving and dissecting more into this particular topic. We are definitely going to be taking a short break for a while. Even though that the solution has mentioned it may not fit everyone, but we fit you in regards to getting the information out. Stay with us here. We'll be back in a minute here on Wacana English Edition.
Any regrets quitting UMNO?
No, for me, I'm not regretting at all. I'm happy to be in the other party because UMNO is so entrenched into like corruption practice, and then running away from the very principle they have advocated many years ago.
This is our main attraction. This is a Ninja Challenge.
thank you so much for still staying on with us here on Wacana English Edition, where we are transparent here at Sinar Daily. We want to give you all of the discussions out there as transparent as we possibly can, talking about all the hottest topics around and what is hotter than we want to talk about the 3R. Again, it is not the reuse, reduce, and recycle thing. It is about race, religion, and royalty. Before we move on to our third block, Nat, you do have something that you want to add on of what Ariza has actually mentioned just now. Please.
Sometimes these panels, I find everyone agrees with each other and you get boring a bit. So maybe I disagree just a little bit if you don't mind.
Sure.
Just a little bit, a thought. It's like one of the things you said was about, politicians must be responsible. I mean, of course, in theory, I agree, but I think in Malaysia we have a little bit of a over dependence on politicians, right? We think that, we need to, we look to them to solve the problems, which is logical and understandable. I mean, that's theoretically their job, right? But for me, over the years, I think this I don't know. I'm not sure whether this is the best place to put our hopes. I find that if because I think for politicians, right, race and religion is a little bit like an arms race. If my enemy is doing it, I don't do it. Habis. I cannot. Okay. So they're forever trapped in that cycle. That they have to one up on each other. It's a racial one-upmanship, right?
Race to the bottom.
Yeah.
Not even to the top. Wow.
Race to the bottom.
Race to the bottom. So I think again now, one of the ways that you need a group of people to show how it can be done, how you can talk about and when it comes to so again this idea of Bangsa Malaysia, right? The whole idea of this is what unites us. And we always believe that there is much more that unites us than divides us, right? But politicians only talk about what divides us because that's how you get votes, right? Yeah. I'm different from this other group,
Correct.
right? So if we can have a group that is focused on building our commonalities and trumpeting our commonalities with exactly the things that you guys were talking about, economy, well-being, justice, these kind of things that all Malaysians can get behind, right? So I think that's the direction in which there is excitement. You ask, is change possible? I 1000% believe it's possible that we can break free from all this old stuff. The only question is whether we're going to do it and whether those of us who are not trapped in that cycle, are we able to get our act together? Are we able to really come together on these things, build a momentum and, sort of like, that's the question I think that's interesting.
And the question is right now then, actually, where can we find the middle ground? Because again, like what you have mentioned, I can understand where you're coming from because again, when everybody's talking about this and nobody's taking the lead about this, and when people actually use it, they would just use it to their advantage. But ultimately, where can we draw the line? Or is it just as simply as just drawing a line on the sand because it keeps on moving every single day, Anida?
Yeah, it definitely is difficult, and I think that's why the legal route is, I think that's where they're looking at to kind of draw that line. So having laws or amendments to the Sedition Act or improvements on it, because that's what laws are for, right? So socially engineer new behaviors and good behaviors moving forward. And it's, to be fair, it's also a reflection of the current times, right? It's also a response to what the society has been saying. People now are a lot more active on social media. They are also a lot braver in calling out institutions and holding them accountable. So it's both. So I think that line has already starting to be drawn. It's just now, how do we institutionalize it and then make it a new muscle moving forward? So I think it will definitely be progressive. The legal route is definitely one. Civil society is definitely another route, but it's going to be still very complex moving forward because race, religion, and at least race and religion are a lot more abstract. In terms of how people associate themselves with it.
There's only so much that the legal route can set the framework, but the shape of how things are going to move forward, it's still, I think, very fluid because it's a very complex discussion. But having said that, I was just thinking, like, if there is like the cancel culture, right? So if I know it's a very Western concept, and especially among the young ones.
Sure.
But if, say, in 20 years, that generation grows up to be in position of power, and that whole approach takes a very local-rooted concept, probably we would be able to reach a situation, an environment where automatically you would push aside those with certain agenda along the race and religion line. So what I'm trying to say, again, the problem with it, if you look at it in the political sense, it's also supply and demand, right? Like there's demand for that type of politics. There is plenty of supply because it's the easiest way to get support. But if we build up the individual, we build up the community to like call out or check and balance and all that, I think there is hope in us pulling the conversation back to the middle, finding that middle ground. It may not be center, but it needs to move from the extreme right or the extreme left that it could sway.
Okay, controversial here. I mean, like the fact that we are discussing this at length and we are still having a lot of complications trying to figure out where the middle ground is. Should we just abolish it altogether then? Just put it aside, be gone with it, and hey, be like how they are in the States. You know, everything is free. You can talk about anything about anyone.
Well, I mean, for me, where do you draw lines, right? I think some simple ways is like, I draw the line at inciting violence. I don't believe you should say, let's kill Meor because you don't like him. I mean, that's...
Direct me there, okay, fine.
I mean, that's
against violence.
I used to be a maths teacher, tuition teacher, right? And I like things that are easy to define. Right? That's easy to define. You don't incite violence. You don't say, let's harm these people, right? But other than that, a lot of it is pretty vague. But I don't think we need very, very clear definitions. I have some agree, some slightly different. I'm also not a big fan of like the legal route. Like we legislate. I mean, social engineering, I think that's original intent of laws. But nowadays, if you ask me, I'm biased as well. I work in communications, right? So I think social engineering happens from communications, right? The kind of what kind of world you want to envision, So I feel like supply and demand, right? For me, my personal belief, I don't believe there's a demand for racial, religious politicking. I don't think people wake up in the morning and like, oh, I wish you had more race and religion divisiveness, right? That's not what they want. But it's, supply and demand. In my line of work, we create demand, right? That's not how, you don't sell products that people need. You make them believe that's what they need, right? That's the hasut that we do, lah. It's terrible, madman, right?
Totally.
But but I believe that the government, I mean, again, we don't rely solely on them, but they are uniquely positioned to really change the narrative, right? And again, 60 years, we've been like, race is the narrative. That is the narrative, the political narrative of the country. And from there, it seeps into every aspect of our lives, right? And if you really wanted to, you can totally change it. I mean, you can concentrate on different things. Madani is a if you really study what Madani means, you take some hours to, it's all good stuff. But it's a bit problematic if you like say Madani and people's like, apa tu? That's a bit of, but with these kind of ideas, right? Or even One Malaysia back in the day, but it was a great idea, but didn't have the sort of like substance to back it up. But if you really start talking like we are really, something like a Bangsa Malaysia, or we are united people, right? That we are people with much commonalities, something that goes beyond just the nasi lemak. Nasi lemak is all great, but you want to do something deeper than that. If you really start talking about it, start living it, start showing people what it looks like, I think that's, people will be like, oh, I want more of that. I want to feel like I'm a part of a united nation, right? I don't want to feel like I'm a bala all the time.
All right. Yeah. But unfortunately, I think what's going to be happening within this next few weeks with the state elections happening, a lot of political parties out there, I wouldn't say that they will use this tactic, but some of them may be, squeezing the likes out of it because that's what you will get votes with that. I mean,
but then again, like what transpired with Sanusi also means that all the political parties are putting on brakes on escalating things further. So in a sense, what has happened to Sanusi happened before the start of the campaign, which means that we are hoping that the campaign is going to be a bit more disciplined on this front. That's our hope. That's the hope. Of course, again, it's all up to the political actors and the emotional tension that will rise from this very high political temperature that we will face in the next few weeks. But again, given how things have played out with the Sanusi case, hopefully politicians have learned their lessons and will mind what they're going to speak in public, especially in ceramah forums where the emotions run very, very high.
Yeah. Because again, Anira, Datuk Seri Anwar has actually given an ultimatum a few days ago in saying that, the government will not tolerate such acts or such behaviors moving forward, in any capacity whatsoever. But is that fine enough, getting that ultimatum from PMX, not doing this, or you think people are just going to be creative about this and wanting this to still be an issue for their own benefit? What do you think?
I mean, obviously he has to take a stand. So I think that was his stand, and I think he needed to do that, and I think that's good. However, whether or not that will still continue, to be honest, I feel like the politicians will still find creative ways to do it. Because I think what is interesting in the past 5 years, which is different from before, is you have more Malay parties, right? So now there are alternatives. So you cannot just use the race-based argument anymore. You have to add value and be like, now it goes down to actual policies. Okay, create your race-based political party, but what else? I have a few to choose from.
What's your unique selling proposition?
What's your unique selling point? Previously, it was monopolized, right? Now that it's not. So that's where I think they have to be a lot more creative in how they are selling this race-based argument. It cannot be as reductive as it was before. Definitely points about policy, economic issues that was raised. It has to be intertwined into it. And that's where they need to be a lot more creative and on the ball and on the ground to kind of attract voters.
Sure, I want just one line to add to that. It's just, I want to see the conversation being moved to what if we continue this route and how destructive it would be for us as Malaysia. People need an awakening to understand that we cannot spend our focus and energy on talking about very divisive issues, because then again, it does affect in the line of work that we are in, business confidence, investor confidence in the country, and the whole trajectory of Malaysia as a nation.
Yeah, because again, we don't really have to look that far. What happened last year during GE15 as well, there was some coalition out there who brought up May 13 as as something that they were using to get their votes, to get people to be on their side. And again, coming back to what we have mentioned earlier in the blog, while we're having all this discussion, it has been the talking point since our fathers, since our grandfathers, great-grandfathers moving forward. Why are we so gullible in this sense? Now, why do we keep on pulling ourselves back into this particular topic and not wanting to move on from this?
I mean, one way you can analyze it is historically, right? For much of Malaysia's history, media is controlled by the government, right?
Yep.
So basically, public discourse is whatever the government wants public discourse to be. Whatever they tell the newspapers to write, whatever they tell the TV to talk about, and it trickles down. And again, so government controlled by politicians. Politicians come from race-based parties and think only about race. So race comes from there, and it becomes in our lifeblood, right? And we get used to it. I give an example, right? When Mahathir became Prime Minister in 2018, right? Everyone's like, first time a non-BN government, wow, right? And we all kind of like waited, what's the new narrative? What's this Malaysia baru that they keep talking about? Waiting. All the while we're waiting, Mahathir is plotting how to keep Anwar out of power, so there's no new narrative, right? And in that vacuum, eventually, it becomes filled by ISIL. When people waiting around, nothing's happening, no new way, let's just go back to the old ways. Right? So again, there's a what we lack is a vision, an example, right? And again, I think if we keep waiting for politicians to do it, but maybe it's the kind of thing, I feel it doesn't need to come. It can be done outside if there's enough willpower, if there's enough people who are willing to kind of like come together and say, let's show them what it would look like if Malaysians were focused on something besides race and religion and all these kind of things all the time.
Yeah, and funny enough, again, moving forward, a lot of politicians, even right now, they would like to incite hate and they would like to actually intensify such notions for their own benefit. I mean, you have friends in the political scenes. I'm not saying that your friends are, like the people who are actually
We all
this.
have politician friends, I would like to
remind
you
everybody
that.
has friends, that's a declaration over here. But the fact that you are very much into this scene, you've definitely seen it with your own two eyes, what is happening in front of your own eyes, amongst your circle, amongst your friend circle. Why do they keep on doing this? Again, is it the easiest way to get the votes at the end of the day, to convince all those makcik and pakciks out there? Is it that simple?
I think yes. A simple answer is that's a lazy way to get votes. And they are, most politicians in private, they're very reasonable, but they put on a persona in the political arena where they have to pander to their vote base. So this is where politicians should show more leadership in not pandering, but leading the society. I know Nat would not agree with me because we do not place so much trust on politicians, but in Malaysia, I think there is still a big element that we want to trust what the leaders can deliver for you. Probably it's lazy thinking from one point, but again, these politicians, most of my political friends, even in the nationalist parties or the religious parties, they're very reasonable privately, but they put on that persona in public as an easy way to get votes. Because if you want to talk about economic issues, real policies, social welfare policies, or any other policy for that matter, it's not easy. It's not easy to be a policy maker. You have to do the research. You have to do the comparative analysis,
and be in government.
In government system to understand how to implement it. Right. So rather than go through all that process, I might as well just go on the rhetoric that win me the most votes and get me that MP-ship or that Adun-ship that pays me so and so.
So are you saying then, I mean, that it is all just an act then? Most of the politicians out there,
No.
they're putting up an act, again, for that sympathy act, for them to get the low-hanging fruits.
Politicians are actors in the public space, in the public arena. So no, well, I think there is disconnect between the realities and what they aspire to be and what they actually think privately. So this is where, again, why I talk time and time again about leadership. Because at the end of the day, it's up to them.
All right. Nat, you've been raising your hand?
Just a little bit. I couldn't resist.
No, please.
When you start talking about, is it an act, right? I mean, I think there's a very simple way to answer this kind of question, right? Let's look at, people in the old days, like maybe, I can't even remember, in ancient days, right? Politicians are defined by their values. I believe this, let's say I'm a Republican, so I really believe all the Republican things, or a Democrat, therefore I believe all the Democrat things, right? Over there it's different now, and here, right? I give you an example, okay? So start from Najib and Muhyiddin, right? So Najib, one Malaysia. Muhyiddin, upcoming challenger. I am Malay first, Malaysian second, right? Few years later, DAP is the best. Few years after that, DAP is the worst. So which one is it? Now I think the questions got Mahathir, right? Mahathir, before 2018, DAP is the worst. 2018, DAP is the best. 2035, DAP is the worst.
Right.
Hadi Awang, right? 2008, DAP is the best. Before that, DAP is the worst. After that, they go running around.
The inconsistencies.
So what do they believe? Is it not an act? How can it not be an act? It's ridiculous to imagine otherwise.
It is actually a whole telenovela which have been going on for how many seasons, God knows. But again, it does impact us as Malaysians as well, because as what you mentioned, Ami, it's all about consistency at the end of the day. Regardless of whatever these guys want to talk in front of the camera, what they want to promise, all we want is all about consistency at the end of the day. Anira, coming to you, because we're talking about consistency. Now, where is the consistency then? Because we've mentioned earlier on the show that we've talked about Sanusi's being arrested and how others are being investigated, such as Ling Guang Eng, Hadi Awang, Tun Mahathir itself. It should follow suit. And what if the authorities do not want to? Well, if they fail to do so in regards of prosecuting and doing what they have done with Sanusi, where does this lie? Because again, obviously people are going to see favoritism right there and there, because one kena, but these guys are getting away scot-free, or it's a bit sensitive, they cannot be touched. This is what is making the rakyat so confused so much. Nira.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the definition of the Sedition Act, because it's so broad. Because it's so broad, it's open to interpretation, and the person who is offended, the burden is on the person who's offended to kind of launch an investigation or a case. So I think that's where that gray area allows for certain individuals like Tun or others to kind of probably get away with, because number one, it could be that it wasn't it wasn't a point where it was too insulting, or maybe Tun was smart enough to kind of craft it in a way that makes it more constructive rather than a personal attack, maybe.
Okay.
But then you're right, like it could be because then no one was ready to kind of launch an attack, in that kind of scenario, because of how vague the law is. So that's why I wouldn't say necessarily it's favoritism. It could also be timing. It could also be which institution are you talking about? Because in Sanusi's case, it was very direct. It was also, I think, a lot more widespread. In comparison to maybe all the others. I think social media also probably played a part into all this. So I think here the question is, are there people, offended enough to kind of use the Sedition Act against it? So I think it's an interesting situation where people are against the Sedition Act, but also don't like how these conversations are done, when it comes to race and religion, but they probably are also not likely to use the Sedition Act. So that's why we probably need new law, right? Or a new kind of policy to go, and maybe it's anti-hate speech or discrimination speech, and maybe that law applies. So I wouldn't say it's favoritism. I think it's just more of like, is there a perfect storm to kind of launch those kind of investigations on those personalities?
Hence why, coming back to our initial start of the conversation, the whole thing tonight is that it is subjective. It is, at the eyes of the beholders, how a person would translate certain messages, how it's being responded, how it's being conveyed, and how you would interpret it, whether it would be, along the same lines, or whether it's actually above the line or even crossing the line. There's no certainty in there, hence why the huge debate about the Sedition Act, about wanting it to be amended or even wanting it to be abolished altogether and everything. Now let's jump in a bit more about, the state elections will be held on the 12th of August. Hopefully all of you guys are making yourselves available, because it is your responsibility in doing that. I do want to highlight a bit on the Muda PSM collaboration here. The existence of Muda and PSM, they have always been shouting, or should I say campaigning, that they are colorblind and they are fighting for equality. It's for everyone out there. But yet so many people from other parties, anywhere else, they are being criticized. Muda and PSM, they are being criticized so much. Are the people a reflection of the politicians that they are in power actually, Ami? Because again, what Muda and PSM are trying to do, again, we're not for Muda here, but somehow or other, what they're trying to say, they're trying to be super unbiased, but still they're getting hit left, right, and center over here. What's going on here?
Yeah, because if you look at the both parties were now in lines, and Muda has been very focused on a lot of championing policies. So has PSM in the socio-economic policies. They've been at it for very, very long years, whether you agree or not with them, but they've been talking about it a lot. So probably there are people who are in the political actor realm who doesn't want policy debates to be at the center of political discussion. So it could be simply that. Could they be threatened? Could they feel threatened by too much discussion on policies? But then again, if you discuss too much policy initiatives, you might get lost in not doing anything. At the end of the day, it needs to reflect political realities as well. But probably back to what you were alluding to, I think some people find policy discussions boring. Simple as that.
It's not sexy enough, isn't it?
It's not highly charged as talking about race and religion.
Yeah. Okay. Our maths teacher, he raised his hands.
Yes.
Nat, please.
I raised my hand when he said some people find policy discussions boring. I was like, yeah, that is
that is you. Okay. No, I mean, but ultimately, guys, does that also mean that people, they just don't care about equality then at the end of the day? Because like it or not, as much as you want to shout out to the public, some people out there, they might want to say that, we need to be all equal and whatnot, but deep inside that, no, I don't want people to touch about my Malay exclusivities, but I don't want my whatever it is that I'm supposed to get.
I suppose it's not so much equality, it's social justice, right? Yeah. Socio-economic justice. There are a lot of issues that touch cut across race and religion when we talk about socio-economic development, such as social security, development. That the Prime Minister spoke about it yesterday, raising the floor, and that has been the topic of discussion a lot in the policy workshops in the past 6 months on how to build a more resilient social security system. And I think this is a very good discussion to have. But it must be must be an honest discussion. And I've always said this: social security cannot be a cannot be championed just for its political purposes by whoever was in power that particular time. It is a long process, but we have to start now in reforms of social security. Probably if everyone has better social protection, and we will be happier, and we will talk about something else.
I mean, the way I like to think of it, right? Politics is really simple. It's like, Rachel and Joseph, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to go to Joseph and say, Joseph, Rachel is very unfair. Rachel is taking everything that belongs to you. And Ame, so you should vote for me to stop that from happening. All right? So Ame is going to go to Rachel and say, Rachel, Joseph is taking everything from you and it's terribly unfair. You should vote for me so that I can stop this from happening. I think there's another old saying, like politics is the art of telling the rich and the poor that you will protect them from the other. You just, I mean, so it's easy because most people think their life is suffering. They're suffering in the world and they want something to blame. I mean, I believe that I have great faith in Malaysians, right? I believe that they are willing to be, fair players in a fair game.
Sure.
Right? They are willing to play by fair rules, to work, to earn their keep and to do their partner. They want to live in a fair world. But everyone around them is telling them, this is not fair because the other fellas taking everything that belongs to you. Then, and again, it becomes an arms race. If he's saying that to them, I don't say that to my fella, then how am I going to compete, right? So that's why
Probably if you use that analogy, then we need to remind them of mutually assured destruction. You talk about this, I talk about that, the country goes down. No, we shouldn't do that.
But ultimately, Anira, coming to you then, after all is said and done, coming after the state elections on the 12th of August, do you see a better Malaysia from there on then? The fact that we are talking about 3R, we are making a matter out of this, we are concerned about people when they talk about religion, about race, and ultimately about royalty as well. Will anything change for the better, to your opinion, moving forward after the state elections?
I think it is a purge that is necessary for Malaysia at this point. Whether there's a better outcome, I think that's yet to be seen. But it definitely is a transition, and transition and change is painful, right? So that's where you see we have a lot more political parties than we've ever had before. We also have a lot more new candidates that we've ever had before. Not just from the new parties, but even from the existing big ones, right? Even the PHBN coalition, they've fielded many new faces, and it's because of what has happened in the past. So there are also deeper conversations and also bolder conversations, like with the fact that we're having it now. So I think there's definitely good steps, which will ultimately lead, I feel, to a better Malaysia that we would like to have in the future. But immediately after state elections, I'm not sure whether that outcome will be, positive, because no matter what happens, I think there will still be a lot of noise, because even within there's already conflict or tension within the bigger political parties, such as in Barisan Nasional, even Pakatan Harapan. What is the future of these parties going to look like in the future? People are already also questioning, is Muda going to last, right? So it's really about, it's the purge. So these are the transitions that needs to go forward. They may die, they may fizzle out, or they may grow bigger. We don't know, but it's definitely a move in the right direction in fostering a Malaysia that we want, at least for this generation.
Did you watch the movie The Purge?
I do hope that.
We already said we don't want violence, so that's where we draw the line.
We pray to the God Almighty that we do not need to come to that. Ladies and gents, it has been such an eventful, such an insightful conversation, a discussion that we're having down here talking about the finding middle ground for 3R conversations. I have to thank all of our panelists over here once again. We have Nathaniel Tan, the coordinator for Project Bangsa Malaysia. We also have Amir Farid Rahim, the KRA Group Political Risk Consultant. That's a mouthful, but congratulations, sir. And we also have Arina Najwa Ahmad Asaid, Bauer Group Asia Director, discussing about this 3R. Again, it is not reduce, recycle, and what the other are. Again, there's too many abbreviations, guys. Whatever it is, what's important right now is for all, and I mean all of Malaysians out there, to be respectful, to be responsible, and to be relatable as well, especially by Amir just now. Because again, at the end of the day, it is for us Malaysians, it is for ourselves, and who better to make ourselves better than the people around us? Whatever it is, be smart, be safe, be awesome. Because again, we need to do that for the unity of Malaysia at least. That's all for tonight's episode. Make sure you guys do follow us on all our socials of Sinar Daily, because again, as mentioned, we are transparent. All the latest updates are on all our socials, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, as well as the website as well. Don't forget the YouTube channel too. So that's it for now. Hope you guys enjoyed this particular edition. My name is Meor Addelan. See you on the next one. Happy weekend. Take care. Bye.